This story is titled Soon to Be Ex-Wife Demand. I took care of her baby with her brother-in-law, saying her body, her choice. So I also made my choice, but it destroyed her life. Hey everyone! The channel's been slowing down a bit, and I spend so much time finding these stories for you. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world and helps keep this journey going strong. Let's grow together. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Alright, let me start from the beginning because I feel like this story has so many layers that even I have trouble wrapping my head around it sometimes. My soon-to-be ex-wife, we'll just call her Kay for now, and I are technically still married, but only because of the legal system. Where we live, you have to be separated for 12 months before you can actually get divorced, which honestly just feels like dragging out the inevitable at this point. During this cooling-off period, she was supposed to find her own place nearby to make 50-50 custody of our 3 kids easier. Now, why are we getting divorced? Well, Kay's twin sister, let's call her Jay, came up with this brilliant idea that Kay should be their surrogate. Jay and her husband, we'll call him B, have apparently been struggling to have kids. Totally sucks for them, I get it. But instead of, using a regular surrogate or adoption or literally any other option, they decided that because Jay and Kay are twins, Kay was the perfect choice to carry their baby. Now, I didn't find out about this plan until way later. Turns out, this had been in the works for weeks before I even got a whiff of it. It wasn't like they sat down with me to have a proper conversation. No, that would have been too logical. Instead, Kay kind of casually mentioned it to me one night like it was no big deal. At first, I thought she was joking. I mean, who just decides to carry someone else's baby without talking to their partner first? But nope, she was dead serious. She had this whole speech lined up about how it was her body, her choice, and that I had no right to say no. And honestly, she wasn't entirely wrong. Her body, her choice, sure. But then she hit me with this ultimatum. Either I support her decision, or we divorce. She didn't say it in those exact words, but that was the vibe. Like, this is happening whether you like it or not. So either get on board, or get out. I was floored. It wasn't just the surrogacy itself that bothered me. Though, yeah, that was a huge part of it. It was the fact that this had all been planned behind my back. KJ and B had been scheming this whole thing for weeks, maybe even months, without even giving me a heads up. And now I'm just supposed to be cool with it? Yeah, no. I told her straight up, if she goes through with this, we're done. She acted like I was being unreasonable. She said I was overreacting, and that this was a beautiful thing she was doing for her sister. But I don't know, man. Call me old-fashioned, but I feel like if you're married, you shouldn't be making life-altering decisions without at least consulting your spouse. Especially when that decision involves, creating a whole-ass human being. Fast forward a few months and guess what? She's pregnant. When she told me, I just nodded and said, okay, then walked out of the room. 2 days later, I filed for divorce. Apparently, this shocked everyone. Kay acted like she didn't see it coming, which honestly blows my mind. Like, I literally told you this exact thing would happen. What did you think? That I was bluffing? That I'd just magically get over it and be okay with raising someone else's kid? J and B weren't any better. They tried to guilt trip me into staying, saying I was abandoning my wife and that I should be supporting her during this beautiful journey. But here's the thing. They're the ones who wanted this baby, not me. So why is it my job to pick up the pieces now? I told them straight up, she's your responsibility now. It was like talking to a brick wall. They kept saying stuff like, but you're her husband. You vowed to stand by her no matter what. And I was like, yeah, well, she also vowed to respect me and not make massive life decisions without my input. So here we are. Anyway, that's how the separation started. At first, Kay acted like she didn't care. She was all high and mighty, saying she didn't need me and that she could handle this on her own. But as the months went on, it became pretty clear that she was in over her head. After I filed for divorce, things got real awkward in the house. Kay started acting like nothing had changed, as if I was still supposed to care about her pregnancy, or worse, like I should be involved in it somehow. Meanwhile, I was already mentally checked out. I mean, why would I invest any energy into a pregnancy that A, wasn't mine, and B, was the exact reason we were splitting up? The house dynamic got tense fast. Kay didn't move out because, surprise, finding a place in our area isn't easy, especially when you're pregnant. She kept saying she wanted to stay close for the kids' sake, but let's be honest, it was more about convenience for her. Every time she asked me for something, it felt like she was still expecting husband mode from me. Like, no, I'm not running to the store for pickles and ice cream at 11 p.m. anymore. That's not my job now. She started dropping hints about how stressful everything was and how hard it is to do this alone. At first, I just ignored her. I mean, what did she expect? Wasn't going to swoop in and save the day like I had during her previous pregnancies? Those were our kids, and this? This was entirely her and her sister's decision. I didn't sign up for any of it. Eventually, the hints turned into outright complaints. She'd say things like, "I don't know how I'm going to do this without you," and "It's not fair that I have to go through this alone." I told her, plain and simple, to call J and B. They're the ones who wanted this baby. They're the ones who made all these promises about how amazing this surrogacy journey would be. Let them step up. But of course, they were nowhere to be found most of the time. B in particular seemed to be checking out of the whole situation. He'd show up for the big stuff, like doctor's appointments, but day to day, he was MIA. When I asked Kay about it, mainly out of curiosity, not concern, she said he was busy taking care of J, who was still recovering from her car accident. Fair enough, I guess, but it's not like he didn't know this baby was coming. Shouldn't he have planned for this? Kay didn't seem to want to admit that B's priorities had shifted. She kept making excuses for him, saying things like, "He's doing his best," or "He's under a lot of stress right now." Meanwhile, she was leaning harder and harder on me, as if I was somehow obligated to pick up the slack. She'd ask me to help with little things, carrying groceries, setting up the crib, even rubbing her back when she was sore. Every time I told her no. Not my kid, not my problem. One night, things came to a head. She was sitting on the couch, rubbing her belly and sighing dramatically, clearly trying to get my attention. Finally, she said, "You know, you're still my husband. You could at least pretend to care." I snapped. I told her, "No, I'm not your husband anymore. Not in any way that matters. You made your choice when you decided to do this behind my back. Don't come to me now because you're realizing it's harder than you thought. Call B, call J. Call literally anyone else, but leave me out of it." She cried, of course. That's become her go-to reaction whenever things don't go her way. But at this point, I was immune to it. I told her I was going to bed and left her there sobbing on the couch. The next few weeks were more of the same. She'd try to guilt me into helping, and I'd shut her down every time. It wasn't just about setting boundaries for myself, though that was a big part of it. It was also about principle. If I started helping now, even a little, she'd take it as a sign that I was softening, and then I'd never be able to get out from under her demands. Things took another turn when the baby was born. I stayed out of it completely. Didn't go to the hospital, didn't visit, nothing. I told her ahead of time that I wouldn't be involved, so it wasn't like she didn't know. Still, she called me from the hospital, crying and begging me to come. She said she was scared, that she didn't want to be alone, that I was being cruel. I stayed firm. I told her to call B. She hung up on me. When she came home with the baby, that's when the real chaos started. It was like she thought bringing the baby into the house would magically make me care. Spoiler, it didn't. She'd leave the baby's stuff all over the place. Bottles in the kitchen, diapers on the couch, as if to force me into acknowledging it. But I didn't bite. I just stepped over the mess and went about my day. At night, it was even worse. The baby would cry and she'd come to my room, knocking on the door and asking if I could help just this once. I'd tell her no every single time. She'd get mad, stomp off, and then spend the next day slamming cabinets or muttering under her breath about what a terrible person I am. I'll admit, there were moments when I felt a twinge of guilt. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because the baby was innocent in all this. It's not the kid's fault that their parents are a mess. But at the same time, I knew that stepping in wouldn't actually help the situation. It would just enable Kay to keep relying on me instead of the people who actually wanted this baby in the first place. The final straw came when Kay outright demanded that I take a more active role. She said it wasn't fair that she was doing everything on her own, that I was being selfish, that I owed her this much. I told her, flat out, "I don't owe you anything. This is your responsibility. Deal with it." That's when she really lost it. She called me every name in the book, said I was a heartless monster, that I'd regret this one day. Then she packed up a bag, grabbed the baby, and left. I didn't try to stop her. Update 1 point. Hey Reddit, so lots of you are asking for an update, so here it is. 2 days after Kay left with the baby, I thought, finally, this might actually be the break I need. I wasn't naive enough to believe she was gone for good, but for a couple of days, the house was quiet. No crying baby, no guilt trips, no arguments. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. But of course, nothing ever stays simple when Kay is involved. The calls started the next morning. First from her mom, then her sister. Yes, the same sister who masterminded this whole mess. And even her sister's husband. It was like they'd coordinated a campaign to wear me down. Every single one of them had the same talking points. Kay was overwhelmed, the baby was innocent, and I needed to step up for the sake of the family. Jay, her twin sister, was especially relentless. She left this long voicemail where she basically called me heartless for abandoning my wife during such a vulnerable time. Like, are you kidding me? This wasn't some surprise pregnancy that we'd both signed up for. This was her choice, a choice she made without consulting me, and a choice I explicitly told her I wouldn't support. I didn't respond to Jay's message. Honestly, what was the point? Then there was B, the baby's biological father. He tried to play the sympathy card, saying how hard things were with Jay still recovering from her accident. He even had the audacity to say, "We're all family, man. We should be supporting each other." Family? Are you joking? The guy barely lifted a finger during the pregnancy, and now he's acting like we're some kind of team? I told him exactly what I'd been telling everyone else. This isn't my problem. Step up and take care of your own kid. What really floored me, though, was Kay's mom. She's usually pretty reasonable, but even she was on Kay's side this time. She called me up saying how disappointed she was in me, that she raised me better than this, and that Kay was still my wife. I cut her off right there. No, she's not, I told her. She stopped being my wife the moment she decided to have another man's baby. If you care so much, maybe you should be the one helping her. Silence. She hung up after that. I think it finally hit her that I wasn't going to cave. A couple of days later, Kay came back. I knew she would eventually, but I wasn't prepared for the scene she brought with her. She walked in like she hadn't just called me every name under the sun before storming out. She had the baby strapped to her chest in one of those carriers, looking exhausted but defiant. I could tell right away she was gearing up for another round. She didn't waste any time. "We need to talk," she said, standing in the living room like she was about to give some kind of TED talk. I didn't even look up from what I was doing. "About what?" "About this," she said, gesturing to the baby like I didn't know what this was. "You can't just ignore us forever." "I'm not ignoring you," I said. "I've been very clear. This is your responsibility, not mine." She launched into this long-winded speech about how hard it was being a single mom and how unfair it was that she had to do everything on her own. She kept saying things like, "This isn't what I signed up for," and "I never thought you'd turn your back on me like this." I sat there, letting her talk. Because honestly, what was the point of arguing? She wasn't looking for a solution. She just wanted someone to blame. When she finally stopped, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You signed up for this the moment you decided to carry their baby. Don't act like this is my fault." That set her off. She started yelling about how I was being cruel, how I didn't understand what she was going through, and how I'd regret this someday. The baby started crying, probably because Kay was yelling so loud, and she snapped at me to do something. I just shrugged and said, "Not my kid." She stormed off to the bedroom after that, slamming the door so hard it shook the walls. The baby kept crying, but I didn't move. If she wanted to scream and slam doors, fine. But I wasn't about to let her dump her problems on me. That night, she tried a different tactic. Instead of yelling, she came into the kitchen while I was making dinner and tried to play nice. She started talking about how she missed the way things used to be, how she still loved me, and how she wanted us to be a family again. She even apologized, sort of. She said she was sorry for how things turned out, but she still didn't take any responsibility for her choices. I wasn't buying it. I told her that ship had sailed. "You made your decision," I said. "Now you have to live with it." She started crying again, saying she didn't want to get divorced and that she couldn't do this on her own. I told her she didn't have to do it alone. She had J and B, but that wasn't what she wanted to hear. She wanted me to swoop in and save the day, just like I'd always done before. But not this time. When I went to bed that night, I could hear her crying in the next room. I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't feel bad either. I felt nothing. And that's when I knew for sure it was over. Whatever love or connection we'd had was gone. She'd burned it all to the ground with her choices. The next morning, she tried one last Hail Mary. She came to me with the baby, looking desperate and sleep-deprived. "Please," she said, "just hold her for a little while so I can sleep. I haven't had more than 2 hours in days." I looked at her, and for a second, I almost caved. Almost. But then I thought about everything that had led up to this moment. How she'd lied, how she'd betrayed my trust, how she'd dragged me into a mess I never agreed to. And I said no. "Call B," I told her. "He's the father. He should be helping you." She looked like I'd slapped her. "You really hate me that much, don't you?" she said, tears streaming down her face. I don't hate you, I said, but I'm not going to let you guilt me into cleaning up your mess. This isn't my responsibility, and I'm done pretending it is. She left again after that, and this time, I think it might be for good. Her mom called me later, saying Kay was staying with her for now. I told her that was probably for the best. Maybe now I can finally get some peace. Update 2.0. Okay, it is my. Again, here is what's been going on. 3 days. After Kay left the second time, things settled down for a while, but not in the way you might think. The house was quiet, sure, but it wasn't peaceful. I had this constant nagging feeling that something else was coming, like the calm before a storm, and I wasn't wrong. About a week after she moved out, I started getting letters and emails from Kay's family. Not just the usual guilt trips and emotional manipulation, but full-on arguments, as if they were trying to wear me down with sheer volume. Her mom wrote me this long letter about how I was being unreasonable, and how family always comes first. She talked about how hard things had been for Kay growing up, how much she sacrificed, and how I owed it to her to support her now. I read it, sighed, and tossed it in the trash. What was I supposed to do with that? Wasn't like they were saying anything new. They'd been on this you're the bad guy train since the beginning, and at this point, it was just noise. J and B, on the other hand, tried a more direct approach. B showed up at my house unannounced one evening. I opened the door, saw him standing there looking all awkward, and immediately knew this wasn't going to go well. Hey man, he said, trying to sound casual. Can we talk? I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. About what? He shifted uncomfortably, like he was debating whether to come in or just run for it. Finally, he said, about the baby. About everything, really. I didn't move. Say what you need to say. He looked surprised, like he thought I'd invite him in or something. Not a chance. He started rambling about how hard things had been for him since Jay's accident, how he was trying to juggle everything, and how he really needed me to step up and help out for Kay's sake. For Kay's sake? I repeated, cutting him off. This has nothing to do with me. That's your baby. Your wife's sister agreed to this knowing full well what it meant. Why are you even here? He looked flustered. It's not just about the baby, it's about family. We're all connected in this. I couldn't help but laugh. No, we're not. You, Jay, and Kay decided all this behind my back. You excluded me, and now you're acting like I owe you something? Get real. He tried to argue some more, but I wasn't having it. I told him to leave and not come back unless it was to take full responsibility for his kid. He didn't like that answer, but he didn't have much of a choice. He left, muttering something about how I'd regret this. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Either way, it's not my problem. Meanwhile, Kay was still at her mom's, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally started to figure things out. But nope. Instead, she started using the kids as leverage. She called one night and asked if she could come over to spend time with them. I said sure because they're still her kids, and I'm not going to keep them from her. When she showed up, though, it was clear she had an agenda. She spent the whole evening talking about how hard things were for her, how the baby kept her up all night, and how she just needed a little help to get back on her feet. She even brought up the idea of moving back in, just until she could figure things out. I shut that down immediately. No, I told her. You made your choice. You don't get to come back here and act like nothing happened. She tried to argue, of course. She said it wasn't fair to the kids to keep their family apart, and that I was being selfish. I reminded her that she was the one who decided to blow up our marriage for her sister. You don't get to play the victim here, I said. You chose this. Now live with it. That was the first time I saw real anger in her eyes. Up until then, it had mostly been sadness, guilt-tripping, and frustration. But this was different. She looked at me like I was the worst person on the planet and said, "You'll regret this one day. I promise you." Then she grabbed her stuff and left, slamming the door behind her. The weeks that followed were surprisingly uneventful. I settled into a routine with the kids, focusing on giving them as much stability as I could. They asked about their mom sometimes, why she wasn't living with us, why things were different, but I kept my answers simple. Mom and I are figuring things out, I'd say, but we both love you very much. It wasn't a lie exactly. I still loved my kids more than anything, and I knew Kay did too, in her own way. But that didn't change the fact that we were on completely different paths now. She'd made her bed, and I wasn't about to climb into it with her. That said, I couldn't help but notice how much lighter I felt without her constant presence. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or dealing with her drama. It was just me and the kids, figuring things out one day at a time. And honestly, it felt good. Then came the legal stuff. Divorce proceedings officially started, And that opened up a whole new can of worms. Kay's lawyer tried to paint me as the unreasonable one, saying I'd abandoned her during a difficult time and refused to help with the baby. My lawyer countered with the facts. The baby wasn't mine, I had no obligation to help, and Kay had made the decision to go through with the surrogacy despite my objections. It was messy, but I wasn't worried. The truth was on my side, and I had plenty of documentation to back it up. Texts, emails, even voicemails. All of it showed that Kay knew exactly what she was doing, and that I'd been clear about my boundaries from the start. Still, it was exhausting. Every time I thought I was done dealing with her drama, something new would pop up. Her family kept reaching out, trying to guilt me into making things right. Even J and B tried to mediate, as if they had any right to tell me how to handle my life. I ignored them all. I'd spent enough time cleaning up Kay's messes, and I wasn't about to start again now. Iun Sakrafor. Through it all, one thing became crystal clear. I was done. Done with the guilt, done with the manipulation, done with the constant drama. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life again. And no matter how much Kay and her family tried to pull me back in, I wasn't going to let them. This was my chance to start over, to rebuild, to focus on the things that really mattered. My kids, my own happiness, and a future where I wasn't constantly cleaning up someone else's mess. And for the first time in months, I felt like that future was within reach. Final update. Hey guys, this is my last update. Here is what has been going on. After weeks of back and forth drama, I finally got a taste of what my life might look like without Kay's constant chaos. It wasn't perfect. I was still navigating how to balance work, being there for my kids, and the mess that was the ongoing divorce. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like things were heading in the right direction. Kay stayed with her mom for the most part, which made things less tense around the house. She still had her visitation days with the kids, and while I wanted to keep the peace for their sake, it wasn't always smooth sailing. During one of her visits, the kids came back talking about the baby. My youngest asked if their new sibling was going to live with us eventually. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I had to sit them down and explain, carefully, that the baby wasn't their sibling in the way they were thinking. I told them that the baby was staying with their aunt and uncle, and that while their mom had helped bring the baby into the world, it didn't mean they'd be living with us or playing the same role as a brother or sister. My oldest nodded, clearly trying to act like they understood, but I could tell they had more questions. My youngest just asked, "But why isn't the baby like us? How do you explain surrogacy to kids? How do you make them understand that their mom's choices had nothing to do with them, while also being honest without bad-mouthing her?" I did my best, but that conversation stuck with me for days. Meanwhile, I had my own life to sort out. The divorce wasn't just emotionally draining, it was financially draining too. Kay's lawyer was pushing for spousal support, arguing that she couldn't work because of the baby. My lawyer and I countered that the baby wasn't mine, that this was a surrogacy agreement she had willingly entered into, and that she had her sister and brother-in-law for support. It was an uphill battle, though, because the court kept wanting to consider the best interests of the children. Of course, I wanted what was best for my kids, but I wasn't about to let Kay use them as leverage to squeeze more money out of me. To make matters worse, her family started meddling again. Jay sent me this long, dramatic email about how I was punishing Kay for doing something selfless, and how it wasn't fair for her to be struggling while I was living comfortably. First of all, I wasn't exactly living in luxury. I was juggling work and raising 3 kids on my own. Second, Kay's struggles weren't my responsibility anymore. She made her bed, now she had to lie in it. Still, the email got under my skin. It wasn't that I cared what Jay thought of me, but it was frustrating that they kept spinning this narrative where Kay was some kind of martyr and I was the villain. I wanted to reply, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. They'd already made up their minds about me, and no amount of explaining was going to change that. One surprising thing that came out of all this was how much closer I got to my own family. My mom, who had been my biggest supporter from the start, stepped up in ways I didn't expect. She started coming over more often to help with the kids, whether it was cooking dinner, helping with homework, or just giving me a break when I needed it. She also wasn't shy about telling me when I was being too stubborn or when I needed to lighten up. I didn't always agree with her, but I appreciated having someone in my corner who wasn't afraid to call me out when necessary. Even my dad, who usually keeps his opinions to himself, had a few choice words about the situation. He told me, "You did the right thing by sticking to your guns. People like Kay will always try to guilt you into cleaning up their messes, but you don't owe her anything. Just focus on your kids. That's what matters." That became my mantra. Focus on the kids. Every decision I made, every interaction with Kay, every argument with her family, I filtered it all through that lens. What's best for the kids? How can I give them as much stability as possible in the middle of all this chaos? Kay, on the other hand, seemed determined to make things harder than they needed to be. She'd text me at random times, asking for favors, or trying to rope me into her problems. One day, she called me in tears, saying she couldn't afford daycare for the baby and needed me to loan her money. I reminded her, again, that the baby wasn't my responsibility. She hung up on me, and 5 minutes later, I got a text from her mom calling me heartless. This became a pattern. Kay would hit a roadblock, and instead of dealing with it herself or turning to J and B, she'd try to drag me into it. At first, I'd respond politely but firmly. Over time, I stopped responding altogether. It wasn't my job to bail her out, and I wasn't going to let her guilt me into thinking otherwise. Despite everything, there were moments when I almost felt sorry for Kay. She looked worn down every time I saw her, like the weight of her decisions was finally catching up to her. During one of our custody exchanges, she asked if we could talk privately for a minute. I hesitated, but I agreed. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said, not meeting my eyes. For everything. I know I messed up, and I know I hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to say, it's too late for apologies. Another part wanted to ask her why she didn't think about the consequences before going through with all this. But instead, I just nodded and said, I hope things work out for you. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I ended the conversation there. I wasn't interested in reopening old wounds. Whatever guilt or regret she was feeling, that was her burden to carry, not mine. These days, I'm focused on rebuilding. The divorce is still in progress, but I'm doing everything I can to move forward. I've started setting boundaries with Kay's family. They don't call or email nearly as much anymore, and when they do, I ignore it unless it's directly about the kids. My lawyer is confident we'll get a fair custody arrangement, and I'm cautiously optimistic about the outcome. As for the kids, they're adjusting better than I expected. They still have questions, and I know it'll take time for them to fully understand everything. But they're resilient. They're the reason I get up every day and keep pushing through all the noise and nonsense. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you can't control what other people do. You can only control how you respond. And as much as Kay and her family tried to drag me into their mess, I've finally realized that it's okay to say no. It's okay to put myself and my kids first. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm starting to find my footing again. And honestly, it feels pretty damn good.